In this tutorial, you'll learn how to properly white balance a camera. White balancing tells the camera how it should interpret the color white, which will ensure that all other colors are captured correctly. You should always white balance before shooting, and white balance again if the light on your subject ever changes. It's important to make sure your camera's settings are correct before white balancing. Regardless of which camera you have, always make sure you're in manual mode, and be sure to adjust the iris before white balancing. Remember, if you ever adjust the iris after white balancing, you'll need to repeat the process, as this changes the amount of light that hits the sensor. Now for the process. For the purpose of this tutorial, we'll be using a Studio Panasonic 170, but the process for white balancing will be similar for any camera. We'll go into the specific features and settings for each camera later in this tutorial. Start by having your subject hold up a piece of white paper under the lighting that they will be filmed in. It's important that the paper is in the same lighting as your subject, otherwise the camera will not capture the colors in your shot correctly. Zoom in on the piece of paper so that it fills the entire screen. Make sure that only the paper is in the frame. Take care to exclude the subject's fingers and any shadows. Next, press and hold the white balance button until the message ABB End is displayed. This will take 2 or 3 seconds. Now, zoom back out and check the viewfinder to ensure that the colors are being displayed properly in your shot. If your shot has a yellow or blue tint, or if things just look a little off, you'll want to repeat the process of white balancing again until the colors are properly displayed. Now for the cameras. The 3 cameras we'll be talking about today are the Panasonic 150, 80, and 40. Let's look at the settings for each camera specifically. You need to make sure these settings are correct before white balancing. First up is the 150. Like the 170 used earlier in this tutorial, the white balance button on the 150 is located on the front of the camera. The iris wheel and manual mode switch are located on the side. You'll want to ensure that auto iris is not on by pressing the iris button to toggle this feature off. This camera has a neutral density filter, which blocks excess light. This comes in handy when filming outside or in any other extreme lighting condition. Always try to get your exposure correct with the iris, but if things are still too bright, switch this filter on to block excess light. Also, this camera has an A/B preset switch. A and B are used to save white balance settings for quickly changing between different lighting conditions. Preset is a default white balance setting that may be good in a pinch, but typically is only used when absolutely necessary. Under normal shooting conditions, when you can white balance manually, leave this switch set to either A or B. Next, let's look at the 80. The white balance button is located on the side of this camera, along with the iris wheel and the manual mode switch. With the Panasonic 80, you'll want to make sure that auto white balance is turned off. If the letters ATW are displayed on your viewfinder screen, simply press and release the white balance button a few times to toggle this option off. You'll want to be in either ACH or BCH. Now for the 40. Just like the 80, the white balance button, iris wheel, and the manual mode switch are all located on the side of this camera. One more time, let's review the process for white balancing. 1. Make sure your camera's settings are correct. 2. Have your subject hold up a piece of white paper and zoom in to fill the frame. Remember, make sure no fingers or shadows are on the paper. 3. Press and hold the white balance button until the message ABB End appears on the screen. 4. Zoom back out and verify that your shot's colors look correct. Always remember, if the light on your subject ever changes during a shoot, you'll want to white balance again before continuing. Failing to do this may require you to use color correction during post-production. So always take the time to properly white balance your camera. Thanks for watching, and happy shooting.